Good morning, class. So today I'll be discussing modules number 14 and 15. So for these modules, we need to differentiate the basic concept of individual and corporate income taxes. Second is to list the inclusion and exclusion and inclusions of gross income, describe the compensation income, and lastly, to compare dealings in properties with capital gains tax. So let's start. Let's start with identifying what is income tax. So income tax is a tax on person's income, emoluments, profits arising from property, practice of profession, conduct of trade, or business on the pertinent items of gross income specified in Tax Code of 1997 as amended, less the deductions, if any, authorized by such types of income by the tax code as amended or other special laws. So ito yung paulit-ulit nating pinag-discussan na before. So technically, this is all the benefits na nare-receive, no? Then less ng any allowable deduction. So yun yung magiging basis ng income tax. So that's income tax. Second, need to determine the taxable income for individual income tax and corporate income tax. So for individuals, we've already identified kung ano-ano yung mga type of taxpayers na yun. So yun lang din yun. So una-una yung mga resident citizen receiving income from sources within or outside the Philippines. Mga non-resident citizen na receiving income from sources within the Philippines. And then aliens, whether resident or not, receiving income from sources within the Philippines. And then for non-individuals, we have corporations, including the partnership, no matter how created or organized. Then domestic corporations receiving income from sources within and without. And then foreign corporations receiving income from sources within the Philippines only, and estates and trusts engaged in trades or business. Also in this slide, I have listed the returns, the corresponding returns for income taxes. So for individuals, for annual income tax for individuals earning purely compensation income. So ito yung mga non-business or non-professional related income. So that's BIR Form 1700. And then for annual income tax return in individuals, estates, and trust, yung 17001. And then BIR Form 7002 naman for non-individuals, so for corporations and partnerships. And then BIR Form 704 for improperly accumulated earnings tax return. This is only applicable for corporation. So please remember these for income tax return. So magkakaiba yan. Yung una, yung for earning purely compensation, meaning ito yung ang source of income mo lang is from your employer. Then 1701, ito na yung in general for if you're earning for if you have a business or proprietor ka, ganun. Then for corporation, 702, and then for IAYAT or the improperly accumulated earnings tax, 17004. So next slide, we need to identify what is gross income. So sabi dito, gross income daw means all income derived from whatever source. So including but not limited to the following line items. So ito yun. So, yung mga compensation for services, so including yung pensions and retiring allowances. Of course, except those exempted by law. Pangalawa, yung mga gross income derived from conduct of trade or business or the exercise of profession. So yung mga professional fee or yung mga income mo from your business. Pangatlo, your partner's distributive share from the net income of general professional partnership. So diniscuss natin before that a GPP is exempt from tax. So yung matataksan yung mga share ng income ng mga partners niya. Then rents. If you have properties na pinaparentahan, then annuities, no, of course, excess lang, yung excess lang over yung premium paid. Then gains derived from dealings in property, interest income, royalties, dividend, prices, and winnings. So, isa-isayin natin yan sa mga susunod na slide. So, please note that this list or above enumeration is not exclusive. So, meaning kapag hindi nandyan, not automatically hindi na siya i-include sa gross income. So, gross income may also include other forms of income which are not even mentioned in the list above. So example, ito yung mga income from illegal sources. So anything that will form part as benefits ng taxpayer na yun will automatically be considered as part of his gross income. Okay, let's start. Una, yung compensation for services. So, compensation for services of whatever kind and whatever form. So, not necessarily cash lang, no? So, any form, meaning pwedeng properties or kung ano man na mga incentives na ibibigay sa'yo for compensation of services. That will form part as your gross income. So, the name by which remuneration for services is designated is immaterial. Thus, salaries, wages, emoluments, and honoraria, allowances, and commissions, like transportation, representation, entertainment, and the like, fees including director fees if the director fee is at the same time employee of the corporation, taxable bonuses, fringe benefits, except those which are subject to fringe benefit tax under Section 33 of the Tax Code, taxable pensions and retirement pay, and other income of a similar nature constitute compensation income. So technically lahat, lahat ng pwedeng ibigay sa'yo ng employer mo, lahat ng magbe-benefit sa'yo provided na hindi siya exempted ng special laws, no? It will form part as your gross income. So that's for compensation of services. Next item, for gross income from businesses. So ito naman applicable if you have businesses or for corporation or if you have sole proprietorship. So for gross income from businesses, so in general, gross income means total sales less the cost of goods sold. So accounting concept, cost of goods sold. So ito yung mga direct labor, direct costs, and then overhead, plus any income from investment and from any incidental or outside operations of sources. So included din yung mga other incomes natin like income from investment or income from incidental or outside operations or sources. Meron din tayong income from long-term contracts. So yung long-term contracts, maka-encounter nyo siya sa Advanced Financial Accounting and Reporting. So dito yung papasok yung mga construction contracts na it will take time before matapos or may more than 1 year yung completion. So ang basis natin in determining what is gross income or what is the basis for purposes of income tax is the percentage of completion basis. So if ilang percent na yung na-complete, then magkano yung gross selling price, yun yung ibibase natin. So yun yung mako-consider na gross income na for purposes of income tax return. Next, we also have gross income from farming. So, meron tayong 3 methods na allowed for recognition of gross income for farming. So, unang-una dyan, yung cash basis or yung receipts and disbursement basis. So, under this method, yun lang yung tatandaan nyo, walang inventory sa formula ng pag-identify or pagko-compute ng profit. So, ito yung formula niya. So technically, yun lang yung cash from sales of livestock and other products raised in the farm. So yun yung cash receipts mo, no? Plus the value of the property received from sales. If merong ding other property or other yan na na-receive mo in exchange other than cash. Then plus the profits or gains from the sale of livestock or other items purchased. And then gross income from all other sources. If meron ka ding income from other sources, then that will be your total gross income. If we are using the cash basis or the receipts and disbursement basis for gross income from farming. So next basis is the accrual basis. So ang accrual basis naman, ito yung gagamit ka na ng inventory. Actually, ito yung ginagamit natin sa accounting, yung usual computation natin ng gross income sa accounting. So that's sales less ending inventory, then less beginning inventory, then less purchases. That will be the gross income for that particular period. Then crop basis, ito naman yung method of reporting income na engage in producing crop that will take more than 1 year bago from time of planting up to disposing the crop. So in such cases, the entire cost of producing the crop must be taken as deduction in the year in which the gross income from the crop is realized. Next slide. So gross income from petroleum operation. So ito naman yung dealing sa mga petroleum products. So gross income from petroleum operation means the total entitlement of the gross proceeds from sale of at market price during the taxable year of petroleum produced under the service contract and such other income incidental to and arising from any of the petroleum operations of the contractor, provided that the amount of Filipino participation incentive allowance received by a Philippine corporation pursuant to an operating agreement under petroleum service contract between a service contractor and the government under Presidential Decree number 87 shall not be included in the gross income of the Philippine corporation. So yung sinasabi lang dyan, yung total entitlement ng proceeds from the sale at market price. So kung magkano lang yung entitlement natin dun sa petroleum operation natin, and then less yung any cost plus yung other incidental income. Tapos may additional provision lang, no, yung Filipino Participation Incentive Allowance. So yun yung minimum of 1.5% na may maximum of 7.5% ng gross proceeds for service contractors. So dito, at least 15% dapat yung participation ng Filipino companies sa mga petroleum contract para ma-consider or maging allowed siya dito sa Filipino Participation Incentive Allowance. Next slide. Number 3, yung payments made by GPP to a partner and the distributive share of partners in a net income of a GP. So ito yung nasabi ko na rin before, no? For general professional partnerships, since they are exempt sa income tax, ang matataksan individually are their partners, no? So next one is the rent or lease income. So reporting of income by lessor. So these are the rent paid by the lessee for the use of lease or property is a taxable income to the lessor kung magkano yung actual rental payment. So that's the general rule. Rent income may be in the following forms. Una, cash at the stipulated price kung magkano yung napag-usapan based sa contract. Pangalawa, obligations of the lessor to the third persons paid or assumed by the lessee. So perfect example dito yung mga real property taxes. Kapag inassume ni lessee, no, that will also form part as income ni lessor. Kasi nga, ang may responsibility talaga nun is the lessor since he is the owner. Pero since ang nagbayad is si lessee, it will form part as additional gross income kay lessor. Third one, advance payment, which must be prepaid rentals. So since we're using cash basis dito for rent, so actual amount of cash received as rental payment. So yun yung general rule, provided na hindi siya loan to lessor, hindi siya option money for the property, and hindi siya security deposit for faithful performance of the lessee of obligation. Pwede ma-consider yung security deposit if may apply din siya eventually dun sa rental. So meaning mako-consume din siya ni lessee. So prepaid rent must be reported in the full year of the receipt, no, regardless of the accounting method used by the lessor. So kung kailan talaga ma-receive yung amount ng rentals. Fourth one, leasehold improvement. So kapag meron kang nirentahan, then meron kang in-improve that will add value, no, dun sa property na yun, that will also form part as additional improvement. So yun additional part of gross income. So that's leasehold improvement. So ito yung mga permanent, no? Like for example, you're renting a commercial space, pero in-improve mo, like nagdagdag ka ng, pinaganda mo yung fencing, or in-improve mo yung ceiling, or kung ano man, that will give or adds value dun sa property. So it will also form part as gross income ni lessor. So next slide is the annuities and life insurance policies. So eto, annuities paid under annuity contract in excess of the consideration paid and includable in gross income. So dito ang basis lang natin, since we're talking about income, kung magkano lang yung excess dun sa consideration na binayad natin. So for example, ang binabayad mo for a month for annuities is 10,000. Then after let's say 20 years, no, na-receive mo na yung ano. So if compare mo lahat ng consideration paid as compared dun sa na-receive mo, no, yun yung magiging subject lang sa income tax. So kung magkano lang yung excess. Same with life insurance policies, no? Kapag na-outlive mo, meaning hindi, kasi ang idea naman life insurance is bibigyan ka ng money if something happened to you. So if na-outlive mo yon, meaning nag-retire ka na or natapos na yung term, tapos ibibigay na sa'yo yung fund value ng insurance mo, no? Any excess dun sa premiums paid, yun yung mako-consider as gross income. So parang technically, since lumaki yung value nung consideration or nung premium na binabayad mo, yun yung magpo-form part as your additional gross income. So meron din yung mga distributions on paid-up policies which are made out of earnings of the insurance company subject to tax are in the nature of corporate dividends and should be taxed accordingly. So if dividend siya, of course, passive income yun. Should be taxed accordingly. Next slide. So gains derived from dealings in property. Sabi dito, we have 3 types of property na pwedeng mag-give rise sa taxable event. So ito yung ordinary asset, capital asset, and other capital asset. So if it involves ordinary asset, since ordinary asset mo yun, part of your inventory, so 100% of the gain or loss shall be recognized in the ITR as if normal trade or business siya. Yung capital asset naman, as discussed before in modules 11 and 12, these are subject to final tax kasi yung capital gains tax. Then other capital asset, ito naman yung holding period of its asset shall be taken into consideration if the seller is an individual and only the net capital gain shall be included in the ITR. So ito yung mga involving yung mga holding period like yung for investment for long term, no? Sale of tangible asset, ito yung pwedeng mga inventory mo sa usual operation, usual trade. Sale of intangible asset, ito yung mga patents, copyrights, and goodwill. Corporate sinking fund, sinking fund yung fund that makes periodic payment. So technically, ito yung pinupull mong money kasi meron kang need na bayaran ng capital. So etong mga to minsan actually it's a form of investment in the sense na ipambabayad mo din siya ng utang mo eventually. So yung investment na yon, it can earn income, no? And yung income na yon, it will also form part as your gross income for income tax purposes. And lastly, sale of real property, land, buildings, condominium units. So gain from sale of real properties classified as ordinary assets shall be included in the gross income in the ITR. So kailan ba mako-consider na ordinary asset yung mga real properties na to? Of course, if you're a real estate industry, no, like Ayala Land, since yun yung normal inventory nila. Then additional note, real properties acquired by banks through foreclosure sales are considered as their ordinary assets. However, banks shall not be considered as habitually engaged in real estate business for purposes of determining the applicable rate of creditable withholding tax imposed under Section 257.2 of Revenue Regulation 298. So ito, mas ma-appreciate nyo lang yan, yung note na yan, sa pag-usapan na natin yung creditable withholding tax. Yung mga rates kasi it will vary depending dun sa classification ni taxpayer. So minsan mas malaki, minsan mas maliit, depending dun sa type ng taxpayer. Next slide. We also have interest income. So interest income as a general rule is taxable income included in the ITR. So ano yung mga exceptions niya? Unang-una yung interest income from banks, deposit or deposit substitute in the Philippines. So ito yung napag-usapan natin before na subject sa final tax, final withholding tax. Also exempt din doon yung interest income na exempted sa income tax. Ito yung mga long-term deposit, no? Yung kapag nag-reach yung natapos yung 5-year na holding period, then interest income earned from passive investment of foreign governments, financing institution owned by foreign governments, and international financial institution established by foreign government. So if yung investment na yon will be deposited, no, from foreign governments, also will that excluded din siya dun sa interest income na taxable under ITR. However, pag interest income and government securities, so government securities meaning here within the Philippines, under the Philippine government, subject siya sa final tax, no? It will be as if passive income siya, subject to final tax. Next slide, number 8, royalties. So I think na-cover na natin to before. So to reiterate, royalties derived from sources within the Philippines are subject to final tax of 20%. Except royalties on books, literary works, and musical composition, which shall be subject to final tax of 10%. Royalties received by resident citizen and domestic corporation from sources without the Philippines shall be considered in the ITR. So since yun nga, only the resident citizen and domestic corporations are being taxed from their income within and without. So for royalties, when it comes to royalties, kung sila lang din yung nag-i-include ng income from royalties sa ITR, so mga resident citizen and domestic corporation. Next one is dividends. So as discussed na rin before, dividends subject to final tax. Ito yung mga cash or property dividends received by individuals and NRFCs from domestic corporation. So ang crucial dito is kanino manggagaling. Sino yung provider ng dividends? So if from domestic corporation, automatic subject siya sa final taxes. Next slide. Kapag paano naman kapag included sa ITR? So ito yung cash or property dividend received by a resident citizen or domestic corporation from a foreign corporation. Also, yung liquidating dividend. Liquidating dividend represent distribution of all the property of asset of a corporation in complete liquidation or dissolution. I think liquidation or dissolution of corporation was already discussed during your FIN 2. Yeah, but to give an idea, ito lang naman yung binibigay, no? Pag pasara na. Pag nagle-liquidate na yung corporation. So yun yung in the form of liquidating dividend. So ini-include din siya sa ITR. So ano naman yung hindi sinasubject sa ITR? Of course, intercorporate dividends from domestic corporation to another domestic corporation or RFC, and stock dividends. Next slide, prices and winnings. So I think na-discuss ko na rin to before. So prices and winnings na subject sa final taxes, yun yung prices over 10,000, no? And winnings derived within the Philippines. And then prices received by NRNETV and NRFC within the Philippines. So yun yung mga subject sa final taxes. Ano naman yung mga kasama sa ITR? Prices of 10,000 or low or less, no? Received by a citizen, resident alien, or NRETV. And then prices received by domestic corporation, prices received by RFCs within the Philippines, and prices and winnings received by resident citizens from sources without the Philippines. So same concept din, no? If more than 10K, subject to final tax, no? Kapag less than, included sa ITR. Tapos yung pag prices and winnings outside Philippines, check natin kung anong type of taxpayer siya. We also have income from other sources. So medyo madami to. So una-una, yung recovery of damages representing compensation for loss of profits or income are includable in gross income. Recoveries that are to compensate for damage to property, injury to person, loss of life are not taxable. So usually, ito yung, for example, meron kang mga cases, no, na involved ka sa isang case or mga litigation, no. If nanalo ka tapos merong payment for damages of loss of profits, so from the dapat nakikitain mo, babayaran nung kalaban mo sa kaso. So that will be included as part of your gross income. So since technically, may earn mo naman talaga yung income na yun kung walang nangyaring incident or kung walang case. Ang hindi mga taxable yung mga damages to compensate for damage or injury to the person or his property, itong mga damages for loss of capital, since return of capital lang siya, then moral, exemplary, and punitive damages. So basically, ito lang naman yung payment, no? Ito yung payment ng mga kalaban sa cases in for the delay, no, for the kung ano man yung naidulot niyang emotional impact or pain sa credibility ng company, no? So ito yung mga payment na to. So for moral, exemplary, and punitive damages. So itong mga to, itong payment na to, hindi siya ini-include sa other income subject to income tax. Yung details, further details itong mga type of damages nito, I think this will be discussed in law subject nyo. So ang included lang is yung mga damages or payment for loss of income or loss of profit. Next, recovery of bad debt previously deducted. So dito na papasok yung tax benefit rule na sinasabi natin, no? For example, meron kang bad debt, no? Kasi technically, pwede namang i-claim as deduction for income tax purposes yung mga bad debts. So ano ba yung bad debts? Ito yung mga hindi na masisingil na utang. Will form part as your expense na. So i-deduct mo siya for income tax purposes. So for example, last year nag-claim ka ng expense, no, for your bad debts. Let's say for example, 500,000. Kaso this year, na-receive mo or nakapagbayad din eventually. Na-receive mo rin siya. So since last year na-deduct mo siya for income tax purposes, this year need mo rin siyang masubject sa tax kasi nga nag-benefit ka na before. So yun yung tax benefit rule. So magiging taxable siya if deduction of the bad debt in prior year resulted in income tax benefit to the taxpayer. The bad debt recovered is taxable in the year of recovery. So kung kailan mo na-recover yung bad debt. Hindi siya magiging taxable if the deduction of the bad debt did not result to an income tax benefit to the taxpayer. Meaning, kapag kahit i-consider mo yung additional benefit na yon, kung yung pagkaka-recover mo ng bad debt, is loss pa rin yung result ng operation mo. Of course, wala ka naman matataxan since net effect niya is loss pa rin. So, not taxable. So, income from bad debt recovery, the recovered amount of the previously deducted which resulted in the income tax benefit. So, kung magkano yung na-recovered mong amount. Of course, up to the extent lang nung magkano yung na-deduct mo from prior year. Next slide, refund of deductible tax. Same with bad debts, no? If meron din tayong mga na-refund na taxes, so pwede rin natin siyang considered ulit as part of gross income kapag nagkaroon ng refund of taxes. Tax benefit doctrine also applies with respect to refund or credit of taxes which were claimed and deducted in a previous year. So taxable siya if the tax paid is a deductible tax. So yung refund niya is taxable in the year of receipt. Hindi taxable kapag of course hindi naman deductible yung tax. Wala ka din naman na claim na benefit before. So income from tax refund, the refunded amount of tax which previously deducted and which resulted to an income tax benefit. So sir, ano ba yung mga deductible taxes? Ano ba yung mga non-deductible taxes? So technically, ang mga deductible taxes are mga other percentage taxes except yung stock transaction tax under Section 127 of the Tax Code. So Section 127 of the Tax Code, yun yung tax on sale, barter, exchange of shares, stock listed and traded through local stock exchange or through initial public offering. So yun yung exemption niya. Tapos yung mga non-deductible taxes, of course, yung income tax, donors, estate, VAT, tsaka stock transaction tax under Section 127 of the Tax Code. Ito usually madalas namin tong chine-check, no, in actual practice nung nag-work ako sa SGV. Madalas namin chine-check yung deductibility or yung propriety ng mga amount of taxes na kiniklaim nila for income tax purposes. Kasi minsan may mga nahahalo silang mga non-deductible taxes. Like for example, yung mga VAT, no, minsan nakiklaim nila as deduction for income tax purposes, mga donors tax na hindi naman dapat. Tapos for deductible taxes, chine-check namin na ini-insure namin if na-claim ba, like mga excise taxes or mga real property taxes. Also yung fringe benefit tax or yung FBT, deductible din siya for income tax purposes. Next slide. So we also have tournament prizes. So included in the ITR kapag cash prize won by local players participant in a tournaments are not passive income in as much as participating in such tournament is their profession and or occupation. So perfect example for this one is Manny Pacquiao. So since he is a professional boxer, yung kinikita niya dun sa mga competition na nilalabanan niya will form part as his gross income. So even though nire-represent niya, no, professional boxer kasi he's being paid for that profession. Subject to final tax yung cash price of foreign players participant, no? Pag foreign yung players, subject siya sa 25% final tax. Ano naman yung mga exempted sa income tax kapag tournament prizes? So ito yung mga prizes and awards granted to athletes in local and international sports competition and tournaments, whether held in Philippines or abroad, and sanctioned by the National Sports Association. So ito yung, for example, mga Olympics, no, you're representing the Philippines. So if meron kang na-earn na income or yung prizes mo may monetary amount, so that will not form part as gross income kasi sanctioned siya by National Sports Association. Next slide. Number 5, for forgiveness of indebtedness. So forgiveness of indebtedness meaning pag kinondone yung utang sa'yo, no? Meaning hindi ka nasisingilin dun sa utang. So paano siya may include sa ITR? Ano-ano yung mga condonation of indebtedness na included sa ITR? When a creditor cancels a debt as part of business transaction or in consideration of personal services of the debtor, the condoned debt is taxable income to the debtor. For example, may utang si A kay B, instead of A paying B, no, magre-render na lang ng service si A kay B. So as if binayaran niya, as if service income niya yon, so that will form part as his gross income. So tax as a dividend kapag ang debtor is a stockholder of the corporation which condone the debt, no? The condonation is considered an indirect payment of dividend. So if we're talking about dividend, it should be taxed accordingly as if it's dividend. Subject naman siya sa donor tax kapag nag-condone lang without walang consideration. Like, okay, sige, wag mo nang bayaran yung utang mo. So as if dinonate ko sa'yo yun. So if it involves donation, hindi na siya subject sa income tax. Magpo-form part na siya as donation, then subject siya sa donor's tax. Yun ang titingnan nyo. Kung una, if may consideration, meaning may change of service or may binigay in exchange of condonation of debt, then that will be included in ITR as part of gross income. Kapag wala, donor's tax yun. Kapag ang provider or ang debtor is a stockholder ng corporation, na nag-condone ng debt as if dividend yung binayaran, yung payment, no? So it will be taxed as if dividend. So pag dividend, either check natin kung ano ba yung source, no? Since domestic corporation, no, passive income. If hindi, check natin if resident ba or hindi. Pag resident, isama sa ITR. Pag hindi, wala tayong gagawin since outside of the Philippine tax jurisdiction. Next, income from illegal sources. So any unlawful gains are taxable and includable in the ITR. Kahit income mo from illegal or illegal gambling, or if you're involved into drugs, no, yung amount of your income from there will also be included in the ITR. That's the idea, no? Of course, if you're going to be honest na i-report mo pa rin siya sa ITR mo. Kasi ang idea naman kasi ng gross income is any income, no, any benefit na na-receive mo. So since technically yung mga gains na yun is also your benefit, dapat isasama din siya sa nire-report na income under ITR. Next, yung unutilized excess campaign funds. No? So if you're a candidate running for a political position or for a public position, of course, you meron kang mga marireceive na mga campaign funds from your subordinates or from your supporters, no? Any unutilized or meaning hindi nagamit na campaign fund will form part as your income din, subject to income tax. And additional requirement na dapat yung mga nagamit mo, na consume mong mga campaign funds must be properly liquidated, meaning dapat na-submit yung mga necessary requirements kay COMELEC, no? Kasi kung hindi, yung amount, yung buong income ng campaign fund mo, kahit na utilize mo na siya, masasubject siya sa income tax. So, i-include natin siya sa gross income kapag unliquidated yung campaign funds. So, next slide, ito na lang yung mga others, no, other na kinukonsider sa mga early withdrawals from a personal equity and retirement account or yung pera. So ito lang naman yung technical retirement account lang siya. So kapag nag-early withdrawal ka, will form part as your gross income then. Yung gain on sale of retirement by a corporation of its own bonds, no? Kapag mas nabili niya or nabili niya na mas mura, less than the value of such bond, as if additional income siya sa corporation, so taxable din yun. Next is if bonds are issued by a corporation at a premium, the net amount of such premium is gain or income which is prorated or amortized over the life of the bond. So I think yung idea ng bond was already discussed during FinAct 2. So yung premium nun will be amortized based dun sa life. Yun yung mako-consider natin as additional part of gross income. Then stock options granted to a supplier of goods or services. Next slide. Wow. As one of our agenda as well in these slides is the compensation income. So ano ba yung pwedeng ma-consider na compensation income? So ito yung cash or allowances, property, the fair market value of the thing taken in the payment is the amount of compensation, employer stock, no? Kung mapapansin nyo yung mga other benefit na binibigay as part of compensation income like employer stock options, always value or property always value that fair market value. So yun yung palagi yung tatandaan. Tapos at the time the services were rendered. So kasama din dyan yung mga promissory note, the fair discounted value of the note as of the time of receipt. The employee shall also record the additional income upon recovery of the discount. Forgiveness of debt for services rendered to a creditor. So papasok din dito, no, as part of compensation income. Kapag meron kang utang sa employer mo tapos kinendone yun, meaning it will also form part as your gross income. Then income tax of the employee assumed or paid by the employer in consideration of the latter services. So ito usually pinoprovide tong mga ganitong incentives sa mga managerial or mga expatriates. I'm actually I experienced to before, no. I have a client na yung mga expatriates are foreigners, no? Mga foreigners na dito nagwo-work sa Philippines. For example, multinational companies. Tapos meron silang mga secondees from abroad. So for example, mga Japanese or Chinese na dito magwo-work sa Philippines. So ang usual case niyan, itong mga expats na to, yung mga tax or income tax na dapat bayaran nila, ang nag-shoulder din si company. So yung income tax, yung supposedly income tax nila will also form part as additional income tax. So meron pa tayong tinatawag na tax on tax. Kasi yung income tax na babayaran nila, since benefit din nila yun at hindi naman ininet yun sa income nila, tataksan ulit natin. So yun yung tax on tax na tinatawag. Na nangyayari most of the time sa mga managerial employees or sa mga expatriates. Kung mapapansin nyo, kumbaga, medyo complex yung computation nun, no? Actually, it's one of the most challenging accounts na na-handle ko before nung nag-work ako sa SGB. Kasi nga medyo complex yung computation. Imagine mo yung tax, kukumputan mo ulit ng another tax. So need mo i-gross up yung mga benefits and everything, lahat. So medyo mahaba yung computation na yan. But in all fairness dun sa account na yun, marami akong natutunan, especially when it comes to withholding taxes on compensation. No? Next, yung mga pensions and retiring allowances, of course, if except those exempted by law, and then stock options. Fringe benefits. Fringe benefit, next slide, which may be in the form of meals furnished or subsidized by the employer, living quarters, life insurance premium, paid by the employer with the insured employee is the beneficiary, facilities, or privileges provided by employer or allowances. Technically, ito yung mga incentives, no, na binibigay ni employer sa mga employees niya. So any incentives like dito na papasok yung mga housing incentives, no, mga expense account, vehicles na binibigay, no, mga company car. Minsan meron din silang mga binibigay na household personnel, mga maid, driver, or security guard, no? Tapos, or bodyguard, sorry. Tapos, yung mga interest on loan na yung interest is lesser as compared to the normal interest rate, which is 6%. For example, meron magpapautang sila sa employer ng at 2% lang. So, yung difference